FM at 103.7. This is State College's ESPN Radio, 103.7 and 1450. WQWK State College.
Now, ESPN Radio 103.7 and 1450 proudly present The Coach and the Commentator. For the next 60 minutes, join former Penn State basketball legends Joe and John Crispin as they take you through the latest news surrounding Penn State, college, and professional athletics, along with other relevant topics in modern sports culture. The Coach and the Commentator, exclusively on State College's ESPN Radio, is sponsored by Lion Country Kia. Now, here are your hosts, John and Joe Crispin.
Welcome in, Happy Valley. Yes, football season is back. Of course, the Nittany Lions have to start on the road in all white at Purdue. But as much as the commentator in me would love to break down football, the coach and my brother is not going to let that happen. This is the Coach and the Commentator. I am ESPN college basketball analyst, former Nittany Lion basketball player John Crispin. I am joined by my brother, the coach in the equation, head basketball coach for Rowan University and former Nittany Lion great Joe Crispin. And Joe, we have to let people know we are doing this. We're doing a new show. It's a show that you and I pretty much do in our backyards every day. This one, we're allowing the Penn State family to be flies on our wall in so many ways. The question is, why are we doing this? We live in a world of podcasts, homemade YouTube channels, the social media influencers. Why are we doing this?
Well, we're doing it anyway, so we might as well record it and have some fun with it and share it with people. And the flip side of that is, why are we doing it? Where we're doing it? We're doing it anyway, but we want to do it for our home communities, and that's Penn State for us and South Jersey for us, and naturally because of the internet we can share it beyond that, but these are conversations, like you said, that we're having anyway, and we're happy to share it and also stay connected to our home communities, which is what sports helps us to do, and apparently talking about sports helps us to do the same thing.
And I think for a lot of people, they may not know why Penn State is a home community for us. We both played basketball,
especially the younger folks.
Yeah, I mean, look, in my job, I spent a bit of time there in State College again as a broadcaster, as a commentator, as a college basketball analyst, calling games, and there are a lot of kids that'll say, "Oh, it was great what you guys did in 2001. It was so fun, and the banner, they celebrate the banner." And then I say, "Wait, how old are you?" And the kid's like, "Well, I'm 18." I'm like, "Dude, you weren't born yet." So there are a lot of people out there that they may know of us in the sense that we played there and we were the last our team was the last to really do anything. We went to a Sweet 16, and in so many ways we often say that we still matter, and that's a problem, right? Our hope for Penn State is that we don't really matter anymore in the near future, in the sense that this team really starts to turn things around and find some sustainable success to the point where that Sweet 16 banner, it's eclipsed by an Elite Eight appearance. And who knows what from there on out. But I do think there are a lot of people out there that may remember us or have heard stories, which is not always a good thing, by the way, for some of us at least. But I do think it's important that we in so many ways reintroduce ourselves. You went there 97, 98 was your freshman year, is that correct? 97 was my freshman year, and 2001 was my senior year, and you were still just getting started. But to a lot of the younger folks, we're old, and to them, I would say we're not old. We're old maybe to you, but when you get to be 43 and 42 or 41 years old, you won't think that's old anymore. But you're right, 20-some years flies by. But the beauty of being Penn Staters is that we still call it home and love to come back and have wanted to do this, and or we do it anyway, and shared some different ways that we could do it, but wanted to do it for our home community and love to stay connected. So, I'm the coach in this equation, but I was a player longer than I was a coach, and I still like that until about 2012, 2013. My job was the same thing as it was when I was 16. Wait.
Playing the game.
You retired in 2012? This is
more or less.
Really, like,
I never really retired. I just stopped taking jobs. Yeah. That's what I did. I used to tell people said, well, when did you retire? I said, I stopped taking jobs. I said no to jobs. I started saying no to jobs, which in hindsight, I don't know what I was thinking because I was definitely paid better than I am now.
You do know as an analyst, as a commentator, like I don't really have that luxury. It's going to be that they stop calling me. Like it's going to be that your contract's not going to be renewed and I have to chase work elsewhere. Like it's such a different part of the business, right? It's all the same business in so many ways, the same industry, but just a different part of that industry where as a coach, as a player, I guess you can get to the point where you say, I'm good, or my body's done, I'm hurt, it's time to start something else. As a commentator, you're like, what the heck else am I going to do? That's this fun.
Well, you also can do it for a long time, and so much you can do it for so long that I guess people can get tired of seeing you. I think the jump shot going in is usually more satisfying than maybe some of the one-liners. But I guess that's the flip side of why the question we always ask, and we talking about that for our first episode here, is why shouldn't we do this?
Yeah.
Because there are so many. Everyone's a commentator. Right. And
well, like I said, the world of podcasts, the homemade YouTube. I mean, how many people? I bet
Twitter alone. Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's
an expert.
Yep.
But social media influencers, like you sit there, you go, what the heck is an influencer? I want to influence in a positive way, but the last thing I want to be is an influencer, if that makes any sense to people.
That's one of your one-liners we'll return to again and again. But right. No, influence in the way it's currently known. That's what you mean. Yeah. And that's one of the things that you've heard me say many times, and I often remind you, I have to think that it helps you be a better commentator is that you don't have the skin in the game that a coach has or that a player has or that you once had as a player. You're able to be wrong and let people forget about it. And you're able to just have an opinion that sounds really strong and sounds really convincing. And it doesn't matter if you're right. You're not going to lose your job as long as you just don't say something outrageously stupid or against the grain. You don't have to be right.
You make me sound invincible. Like my career is like, you're good.
Oh, no. You're not above saying something stupid. But
I'm saying I don't have to say something stupid and lose my job.
Well, no, there's always other forces at play. But from a commentary perspective, we talked about this, and this is the dynamic between the coach and the commentator. When you're the coach, you're in the arena. Yeah. When you're the commentator, you're not in the arena. It's one of the reasons why Tom Brady can't retire.
Right? Yeah. Well, what do they say about coaches, right? You don't get enough credit for the wins, but you take all the blame for the losses type of thing. And I think that's one of the interesting things that really kind of illustrates the difference in perspective, right? Where as a coach, it's not even about getting all the credit. It's just about, in a way, not having to take all the blame. Yet coaches have to do it day in, day out. You lose a game, it's on you. Guys don't play well. Guys don't make shots. How many coaches have come out in a post-game press conference in college basketball, and they've just tried to say, guys, look, it's mismake basketball some nights where the ball just doesn't go in. And media crushes them. There weren't adjustments you could have made to make more layups, or it's ridiculous. But we don't have that on us. And it's why I love my job, right? I always said, never lose. Unless you open up Twitter during a game, then you probably lose a little bit because people are ferocious.
Well, and you can tell everybody, what do I say to you? You don't lose, but you also don't get to win. And that's why I'm a coach. I love to win. I hate to lose. And I wasn't ready. I suppose I had a short retirement, but I wasn't ready to move on with life without the whole winning and losing component. So that's why I'm in what I'm in. But the flip side of that, I'd say, by the way, is and this is we could probably do a whole episode on this of things coaches actually want to say at a press conference.
Yes. I do it all the time.
There's probably I
speak for them. It's hilarious.
Comedians who want to say that, but when somebody says, and I can give you some insight through the times and maybe even during the season of what we actually say at halftime, and when we correct ourselves and we say, no, what's the real story going on? So-and-so stinks right now. That's what's happening. And he needs to not play, but we don't have a better option. Well, you want to say those things, and that would be the commentary that the coach wants to give, but he can't give it. in the press conference, and then you guys can go to town on them later.
Well, as an analyst, we're often told the truth, because one of the things we get to do is we get to build good relationships with coaches, right? We're often told the truth, but we're always...
You should build good relationships with coaches.
Should.
If you don't, it's because you're being a jerk.
Yeah, well, you're being self-centered and self-consumed, and you just want to make news, not report it.
Yep.
And we got a lot of that in the world. But it's one of those things where they'll often say, this is what's going on. Just don't say anything. Because as coaches, you want to keep these guys engaged. They're still your guys. And you understand that the human dynamics at play are often the number one cause for struggles on a team. It's human dynamics as much as it is play or anything else. But I also feel that the whole culture of sports adds to it. And that's something that you and I wanted to get into, especially today, where it's almost like we're starting a new year, starting a new school year, a football season. And that's the beginning of a college sports season. This college sports season is so different. Last year was different. But this year is another step with name, image, and likeness, with the ability for players to transfer. For, frankly, the Big Ten doing billion-dollar media rights deals on an annual basis. The fact of this is a business is now out in front and in your face, and everything is different. It is different than the college sports that you and I played. It's different than the way we grew up wanting to play college sports. Everything is different, and I think we've got some insight as to where that maybe starts. It's not at college. It's not professionally. These things start at the earliest levels. It's getting scarier and scarier, but frankly, it's reality. I think it's something we're going to really try to break down, try to make sense of. Who knows if we're right, but like I say, just because you're right doesn't mean you're not wrong. Just because you're not wrong doesn't mean you're right. So we'll break it down. It's the Coach and the Commentator with Joe and John Crispin. We'll talk to you.
Now, back to the Coach and the Commentator with Joe and John Crispin on ESPN Radio 103.7 and 1450.
Welcome back. It's the Coach and the Commentator with the Crispin brothers, and we talked a little about the culture of sports as we headed to break. And the culture of sports is one that I think is often mentioned but not really understood, right? Culture on a team, we praise it. We say, oh, this team's got great culture. Villanova, great culture. But no one ever really defines it. And there are oftentimes we talk about, well, the whole sports culture. And we gloss over it, but we really don't expand upon it. We don't sift through the layers. And, Joe, that was something that you and I were talking a break. That was something you wanted to explain. And you made the good point by saying, look, we're why guys. And I think you made a few good points as to why we want to get deeper on these things and try to expand upon some of these topics.
Yeah, and then when you're telling me I got to make the point, but then you take a couple of my points, so then I don't get to make them in the same way.
Well, I have to make it sound like I know something and I'm contributing something. Right?
You're taking my points like you do on the air, you know?
Pretty much. I think text me. I do get text always during the game. First off, Greenberg always texts me during the game, but I think that's because he's like my quality control. He wants to make sure that I know that he knows more than I do. So I tolerate that. I do.
Well, I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing the same thing, right?
I actually say a lot of the things that you say, but I always have to give you credit.
Yeah, no, you don't have to. You don't always have to. That's okay.
But I do. It's a pride thing.
I think the thing is that, number one, if you're going to do your pilot episode 1, it's good to be real and jump around, because if we're going to have a conversation, you're not always sure where it's going to go, not to mention with some jabs. But, just vision-wise, for why we want to do any of this is I think a lot of you experience this in your business. I see it all the time watching games or whatever. Like, don't just tell me what happened. Give me why. Don't just tell me what's going on. Let's try to dig beneath the surface and understand the dynamics that are really at play. Let's try to be honest about them. Let's try to contribute in a way conversationally to get beneath the surface of things and ask ourselves, no, what's really going on? And usually you and I often agree, but we talk, and if you're listening to us, you're not sure if we agree.
Yes.
Or we have to explain to each other that we're actually agreeing about this thing, but this, but that, but this. That's kind of how we're wired. That's how we were wired to play the game.
Yeah.
When we played the game, we always say like we weren't easy to coach, especially myself. So I should have known I was going to be a coach. But I was always asking why, or that doesn't make sense to me, or this is why it doesn't make sense to me. We should, but this, what about that? That's those guys are harder to coach. But I guess it gives us some material to work with when it comes time to do something like this. So we talk about the culture of sports. We talk about current events. It's good to get beneath the surface, and there's people doing it on TV, and then but those are often the minority of commentators on TV are often just telling us what's happening. Not let's understand things from a broader perspective in our world of sports and how we can make it better, even in our little neck of the woods.
Well, I always say that too, because I always say, like, what is my job? My job, and I always say this too about higher education. This is one of the things that, look, I don't mean to get into it like this, but this is how we roll. We talk about a lot of things. Higher education shouldn't be there to tell you what to think. Like, higher education should be there to help you think, help you.
You're introducing a whole new show now,
right? Yeah, but I'm saying, but that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're not trying to do this to tell you what to think. That's the point of why, right? Why is it like do this, do that? Is kind of what you're told as a kid. You say, why? Well, because I told you I'm your coach. Well, to some guys, it gets to a point where I say, and I always said this, if you tell me why and it makes some logical sense, I will do it better than if I just do it for the sake of doing it. And I think we live in a time where people demand to know why. And ironically enough, in a time where people demand to know why, they think a lot less. Like, it's the weirdest thing. Tell me why. Tell me why. Well, the why part that you want to hear is whatever you want to hear. What we want to tell you is we want to help you think. We want to start to sift through different layers, because there are many layers to everything. I always tell people, they say, well, okay, you're a why guy. Well, why didn't they win? I'm like, well, first off, that's just a probing, dumb question. Like, you're trying to make a point and you're acting like a kindergartner. So fail number one. But if you want to play that game, I'll play it. Well, why? And you start to expand upon what's going on with the social dynamics of a team who's dealing with COVID, where they're not living in a normal situation. They're living in a hotel room for the course of a year. They don't have to go to school. So why is it that guys are undisciplined in that situation? Well, I say, you know what? There's no collective accountability. They're not together as a unit because they can't be. From simple things like a workout or weight training and team time on the floor. They don't have that. So there's not a collective accountability. There's no individual accountability because, A, you can't make them go to school. There's no class. And I remember some of my conversations with Coach K. I always said, like, you're explaining to the media why you're struggling, and they look at it as excuses. If I tell them the same thing and I say it the right way, in the right text, it's not an excuse, it's a reason. So I do think that what we can do is really explain things to the point where people see reasons beyond the surface, where you see something happen and you say, as an analyst, this is what happened, but here's why it happened. Here's how it happened. And here are other things you have to consider as an added dynamic, maybe an added variable to this whole sequence of events. And you know, as a coach, more so than you ever did as a player, that there's a million things going on within a team, within an organization, within a program that sometimes have nothing to do with basketball.
Well, and all you just said is true. The problem is it's like 47 tweets. Yeah. And so you as a commentator, man, no, you can't do that. You got
that's why
you got like part A, B, and C, and that's all you have. So when you talk about even the dynamics at play for a coach, or oftentimes the incentives that have been created in our current system are totally different for me as opposed to you.
Yeah.
And you might want to get to those things, but you have like a little 15-second bite you have to fill before things go to commercial.
No, Joe, the term is economy of words. Like, what about me says economy of words?
Yeah, well, everyone already knows. First episode, nothing.
Like, nothing. And it's okay. Neither one of us.
It's what I tell people all the time. I say, listen, I can talk with anybody, but I'm still behind my brother on that for sure. 100%.
They say you've got to find a way to fit this point into a small window. And it's like, make the window bigger. Because otherwise I'm expressing my ignorance, not my wisdom. I always try to tell people that, like, when we speak in these Twitter-like absolutes, right? This is what it is in my 140 characters. Is Twitter still 140 characters?
I don't know. I'm off. I'm not getting back on. It's been years.
So Twitter is like, say it's 120 or 140 characters, whatever it is. Make your point 140 characters. If you can't make your point in 140 characters, you shouldn't make it at all. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, the point you're making in a short blurb is not going to be in any way well thought out. It's going to be a hot take. That's what.
There's two things on that though. One is like it can be amazingly thought out. You can be forced, but if you're trying to really get underneath the surface, like you're talking about, to the dynamics of the team, or what we were planning on talking about today, of just the landscape of college sports and some of the dynamics to that, you can't put that in a simple tweet, or you can't put that in a 30-second soundbite. We won't fit it in our little however many minutes we have for this.
So this was calculated, right? We go down this rabbit hole. We start talking about all these other things. All these other things.
That's what a good commentator does, by the way. It makes connections between. You're just steering it back, saying that was calculated. No, it wasn't. Let's all admit that was good host.
It was. We start talking about Twitter because here's why. Here's why we start talking about Twitter. I wanted to bring it back and say, are these not added variables, adding to the dynamic, the challenge of what you do every single day? How different are these from what you and I had to deal with coming up, right? The way you and I were recruited, completely different than even what you're doing at the Division III level. The way you manage players, completely different than what you had to deal with when we played in the late 90s, early 2000s.
I would say this, though.
Social media. We barely had forums to get consumed by.
So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to give a little pushback because I agree. However, I think it's good, one, you point out, like, the landscape of our college sports and our culture now are just, they're not the same. They're not going to be the same. And you have to accept that. The only caveat to that and counter to that, though, is people are still the same, right? The things that they need from a coach, or the things that they need from basketball, we're still motivated. Players are still motivated by the same things. We still like our highlights. We liked our highlights. Hey, if we were going to get on ESPN highlights, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Now the only problem is the kids have like a personal photographer with their iPhone who can make clips and make them look like an All-American in a game. They went 4 for he was 4 for 18, and he looks like an all-world pro.
Says the guy. Wait. Says the guy who just made a 5-minute long video highlight for his oldest son, Elijah, after you thought he really didn't have that good of a year.
Well, you need the highlight, and it's still unlisted. That's how strongly I feel about not playing that game. Like the hype game, I'm not in. The only message that Elijah's getting from me is the same message we got from our father: get better. You're not there yet. You haven't arrived. Get better.
But is the hype game tied directly to the fact that this all has incredible monetary value? Like,
that's where we got to go to.
Biggest thing. That's where the culture of sport can't be discussed without really discussing the fact that if there's no $1 billion contracts, then it looks a lot different. I mean, Joe, when you and I played, and I've said this before, you and I he played for Jerry Dunn at Penn State. You and I never knew what Jerry Dunn made. Like, we never knew, we never cared. But in our society today, everybody's money's posted. Woj at ESPN, right? You get a Woj bomb. It's about how much money someone got. Adam Schefter, same thing. How much money someone got. How much this guy's going to get paid. How much this guy's getting. The guaranteed money on this deal. We know that about CEOs. You know it about presidents. Everybody knows how much money everybody makes. Where did that change? Like, where in coaching did that change? Because when you and I played, I had no idea what Tom Izzo made.
I think there's two dynamics, right, that we talked about when it came to college sports or professional sports or any number of things. Is one, there's more money. There's literally more money.
Yes.
And two, there's more attachment to that money. Yeah. Everyone wants to get in on that money, and they're trying to find a way to get in on that. So on the one hand, there's literally more. So if you rewound the clock, and again, we've had this discussion where we kind of argue, even though we agree, about what we would like college sports to be as opposed to what it actually is. So we often get in these discussions, and you'll hear them on television, you'll hear them on radio, of like what you want college sports to be. We want it to be like it was. Well, there never was this unbelievable golden age of pure amateurism, right? So even the Ivy Leagues were cheating to win the Ivy League back probably 100 years ago in football.
I think we all liked it when it was all kind of under the table.
But also it was based on pride, like just literal community pride, as opposed to the actual financial benefit to the thing.
Yeah.
There wasn't a TV contract. There wasn't gate ticket. Like they weren't making money on this enterprise. They were still losing money probably on it.
Well, that's what makes it amateur athletic. Look, Bobby Jones won how many majors? As an amateur, never took a dime, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Right?
and that's why Division III level is often refreshing.
Athletics.
That is amateur athletics, right? If they're getting an NIL.
Did you just say Division III athletics is refreshing? You sure about that?
Well, it's not always refreshing. There are some elements that are very unrefreshing.
So
but
what did you say? Rowan University right now is probably one of the biggest and best Division III universities out there. Second largest behind Rutgers in New Jersey, right? In terms of public
probably
education.
Something like that. Yeah, I usually say that.
25,000 students.
Yeah, we're getting to 25, but we're over 20. It's a big Division III school. Quite solid in
but
sports.
Still no scholarships.
No scholarships. Kids are paying for school, and there's a cost. It's a different dynamic for these kids. A lot of them are going to work all summer, and they're going to hustle.
How much does that change your perspective on this, though, or does it not change it at all? Because reality's reality. It's more logic.
Well, when we talk about college athletics, there's still a trickle-down effect to that, right? So the kids want some of those experiences, and you want to give them the best experience you can. But when you talk about college athletics in general, and especially the high levels where there's billions of dollars being thrown around, what we often say is like this isn't the same landscape. So even in the last 20 to 25 years, we might not have known what our coach's salary was, but we did know that the school was making money on men's basketball even when we lost because of regional contracts and everything else. So we knew we were of some monetary value, and we were on a video game, and my jersey was in the thing, but it wasn't the same emphasis on the financial, and it wasn't as obvious. And I think culturally, there wasn't the same attachment to money. I mean, the creation, we're a rich country, and it's hard to be rich. I mean, it brings other problems. I shouldn't say that. It brings other problems. So it's hard to be anybody, but it just brings a different subset of problems that often are beneath the surface. And then you got to change on the fly with a bunch of people, whether they're administrators or presidents or whatever, who have been in the system itself for years. Yeah. So when people wonder why it's not cleaner and neater, why would it be? No enterprise would be when you are literally just figuring it out as you go. So yeah, would we as kids, as 18 and 20-year-olds, I mean, imagine you with YouTube. You were dunker, you were showman, you would have been a mess.
They called me Hollywood when I grew up. And then I got to Hollywood and I realized how Pittman I was. But it is true. It is true. Like
it would have messed you up. I mean, and I'm sensitive to that.
I would have been no different. That's the thing. Like we all like to think that our time is the craziest, right? It's the craziest right now. It's like ancient Rome was no different. They're the same human issues. Like they're the same human issues. They just look a little different on the surface because the surface of our world is different. Now, all that being said, the culture of sport has shifted. So there are human issues that do impact the culture of sport, but the culture of sport, maybe because of the money, because of the value in sport and what it means to a kid who could be really good, you're seeing it at the youth level too. And I want to take a break, and when we come back, I do want to discuss like what you're seeing at the younger and younger, some of the youngest levels when you're running Crispin basketball leagues, kind of what you're seeing in terms of the parents' involvement. You also have a great book idea, so maybe we'll talk about that. I still think we got to save that for a whole nother show. I think it's a brilliant book. Who knows?
Good teaser.
It's a great tease. Who knows what you're going to get? We're going to take a break. When you come back, it's the Coach and the Commentator with the Crispin brothers.
Now back to the Coach and the Commentator with Joe and John Crispin on ESPN Radio 103.7 and 1450.
Welcome back to the Coach and the Commentator with Joe and John Crispin. I'm John Crispin, ESPN college basketball analyst, former Penn State Nittany Lion, joined by my brother Joe, head men's basketball coach at Rowan University, former Penn State Basketball, great. I can say he was great. I was just good. It's okay. I'm still
you were great a couple games.
I was
some
great
games
every now and then. Yeah,
some games. Yeah,
it was fun to be around. I was a good team.
You know what? I was great some games too. I just probably got to shoot more.
Yeah,
That's the way it works.
But the funny thing is, people like when we go back, people are like, you guys never missed.
Oh, I'm glad you think so.
It's so funny.
I'm glad we're on VHS and not YouTube.
Yeah, the further we get away, it's more like, man, you guys never missed. The fish was that big, and it is. It's awesome. It's awesome to come back. But we were having the conversation about the culture of sports and kind of how it often moves as values change, right? Whether they're monetary values or what you value, and what you value was often tied to monetary value. So in so many ways, we've seen that shift in sports where even at the youngest level, kids are getting they're getting professionalized. Is that a word? I don't know. I say a lot of words. They're getting professionalized at a young level. And I was having a conversation a while back when I was in Los Angeles doing commercials, and they were talking about the child stars, right? And they said, you have no idea what Harry Potter did to parents of kids who want to be actors. And I was like, wow, I never thought of that. Because their kid could possibly be Harry Potter or Hermione or one of these kids that's getting $15 million a movie to do that. Like, you have no idea what it did to the whatever they call the callbacks and the auditions for kid parts. There are more kids than there are adults because these kids have nothing to risk. Adults have more to risk. Adults have to work. These kids have nothing to risk. Their parents just put them in there. They said that success blew up the child acting market. Is it similar to what we're seeing in sports today, particularly on the football and basketball side? But you're also seeing the professionalization of sport at a youth level in baseball with elite baseball and everything else.
Yeah, I think we talked about it as a market, right? I mean, nobody minds when their kid goes to college and they say, hey, what are you going to major in? Or let us help you find your major, or they sit down with their advisor. They're looking at what a good market might be, right? So somebody who, Aaron majored in speech pathology, or
Aaron would be Joe's wife.
My wife. And part of that was wise, right? Now, she needed her major, and then she ended up marrying me. That's another story, but moving throughout the world. But
wait. Didn't she have not a podcast, but she had a blog.
Married a great blog.
Baller.
That blog would have been
a baller.
That blog would have been blown up by now. It was a great blog, connecting women overseas. It was awesome. Yeah. So better than any blog I ever did. But the thing is like, that's a wise move as a parent, right? That's a wise move, is to say, hey, where's the future here? Where are things moving? Where is a good market? Yeah. What are your skills? What parents make the mistake of is they see an open market. They see a good market where there's lots of money, there's lots of opportunities, and they just say, we're going for it. And they don't take stock of their kids. They don't take stock of their own selves, and they forget that they're both 5'2", and they're going to make their kid into a pro. But where does it start? It starts with the value that our culture places on sports, both with its attention and therefore its money. So what you see at the higher level is exactly what you get when you have this desirable market, and kids have been pushed in that direction, millions of them. And it's not always just, we look at the child stars or the kids looking for the Harry Potter, but it is the same dynamic at play. Is there's this lucrative market, and oftentimes, sadly, it's parents, we talk about the youth level, but the college landscape is what it is because of what's happening when kids are young. Because of this
same way with that's the direct tie into the transfer market. We talked about that, right? The kids that transfer from school to school to school to school. I mean, to bring Brazier Bolton up, right? He's played at 3 different colleges: Penn State, Iowa State, and Gonzaga. Gonzaga was a great stop for him. He was fantastic at Gonzaga, good for Mark Few. But he played at 4 different high schools.
And you don't even have. I mean, that's not even totally abnormal. I mean,
right? That's the normal thing.
We're tracking down transcripts all the time. Even right now, we're tracking down transcripts. But the difference is, and this is what we talked about, the connection piece. Like, people say, I can't believe these kids are transferring. I'm like, this is not the kid's first transfer. This is the kid's 20th transfer.
Yeah.
And, kids transferred AAU teams, they transferred soccer teams, they transferred micro mini teams, they changed leagues, they changed teams within the league. There's so many options. And, what I often tell people is if you transfer, if you make one wrong move, it leads you to make 3 wrong moves, or even if they're not wrong moves, they're just 4 more moves. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, even at the youth level, I don't recruit kids to our programs that much. I just try to offer, this is what we offer. And I think it's good for your kids because I think it's good for my kids. I don't know what else to say. This is what's good for my kids. I think it's good for your kids. But when you have people who are just chasing and they think it's the next thing and the next thing. And I think the other thing that you got to understand is we don't know what we're doing, right? They literally don't know what they're doing. And they kind of know they don't know, but they don't know how little they actually know. So they think they're doing the right thing when they're actually doing the exact opposite of what they should be doing. And when you do that for 8 years, and then you get to college, that's what you're reaping the benefit of. And forget about throwing in COVID and money and NILs. Jeez. Yeah. Not to mention YouTube and Instagram highlights and any number of things.
But it's all the same thing. It all comes back to what's motivating your presence, right? What motivates your presence in the sports? What motivates you to be great? What motivates you to do this? What motivates you to make the sacrifices? What are your motivations? I think the motivations have changed. And a lot of that is because of the money behind it. Because for you and I, we were pretty high level athletes. And I had more offers for football than I did for basketball. But with concussions and everything else.
Yeah, until you took on too many 240-pound linebackers you were something.
Well, we also played at a non-athlete school. There was a small school, so my freshman year, I'm starting varsity quarterback and safety and kick return, punt return, and whatever else needed to be done.
Well, you could have done all those things, but you were literally dumb enough to still try to run the guys over. Yeah, that's right. You can be honest about that.
But at the same time, we had hopes to get a scholarship and play in college, which meant we got to go to college for free. That was the way we saw it, and play basketball at the highest level, the Big Ten, right? Whether it's the Big Ten, the ACC, the SEC, wherever it was going to be. I played the Big Ten and the Pac-10 at the time. And we got to do this at the highest level. It felt like the biggest reward for our efforts. I mean, was it different for you because, you ended up having a great professional career, but I felt like the motivations around playing the game are different to the point where it is more monetary, which means everything else around it changes to be more focused on the monetary, the value, the money value in the sport. Whereas
it's money, but it's also prestige. It's also the ability to say you did this or you accomplished this. I think
it goes back again, Twitter, Instagram, who's going to follow me if I'm not playing?
Well, it also goes back to something that you are kind of alluding to that I think people forget is all these enterprises back in number one, we had a very limited set of options, right? So we didn't have a lot of options. What was I going to, if I didn't want to play for Pippen, who was I playing for? No one, literally no one, right? Yeah. If our dad didn't start the in-house program when you were in second or third grade, there was no in-house program. Yeah. There was nothing. There was no summer league. There was no Crispin basketball. There was nothing. There was no AAU. There was one AAU. It was 2. And I had to try out for one that, dad coached and ran practices in the middle school gym. That's where we lived. And there
were no waivers signed. It was just pre-waivers.
No waivers. There was nothing. There was just show up. And with more options, this is what I often say to people with the kids, you're going to get worse decisions with more options. We're dumb. Any bit of behavioral science research. I was going to say, if you want to learn anything about human beings, you talk about all the guys.
Maybe that's why it was so hard for me in LA. It was just too many options.
Yeah,
couldn't settle down.
It's hard for everybody in LA. Right? You gotta be kidding me. But I was only there for 4 months and it was hard. But when you think about that, people, I forget the book I'm thinking of, but I'll bring it up sometime. In any behavioral scientists or whatever they call themselves, the behavioral economics or whatever, these guys who study human decision making.
Yeah.
Their basic conclusion is that we're just dumb, and we're dumb on an individual level, and we're dumb on a collective level. So when you set before us more options, we're going to make more bad decisions. So when you open up the transfer market freely at grade 4,
I was going to say, it's
parents,
not college. I try to tell people it's not
for parents. But think about this: for parents who didn't play in college, who didn't actually know what it took and how to get better, of course they're not going to make good decisions. I'm not mad at them, but they don't understand. And that's, I use, my own kids as the example all the time. Like, listen, like, I know you think this next thing is the best thing, and you've been sold this bill of goods. And here's the other thing: when there's money involved and people are paying for these teams, people who want to make money can convince you of anything. Yeah. I mean, I make money running youth programs, but it's not like my primary job, and I don't really need you to come. I'm here to help your kid, and I provide for my family, etc. But it's like, I'm doing this and my own kids are in this. So I think it's good for my own kids who want to be college basketball players. I mean, it's probably good for your kid, right? But you somehow think that you need to do more and this and that. And I'm like, I don't think you need to do all this. And sometimes I'm telling you you don't need to even spend money with me right now. Like, just have them go to the playground or something. So they don't know the process, but they want this thing so bad that it drives them, and they have all these options and all these people in their ears. And that's one of the things I've changed in probably the last 4 to 5 years. I try to spend more time on parental education. I know. And again, you get to the college level, and let's take this to college, right? One of the reasons it's not that I like recruiting any transfers or coaching any transfers, but I like kids who have suffered a little bit and learned what's really important to them. And, that's why I don't look down on the whole process, but I just say, all right, you've learned what's the value. You want a home. You want to have fun. Okay, now I can work with you.
Johnny Juzang at UCLA.
Yep.
He reclassified, went to Kentucky, and it'll be interesting to see what Imani Bates does this year. Here's a kid who reclassified to come to school early to get a big payday, only to fail. Who are you? The question is, who are you when you fail? And a lot of these kids, they haven't failed, and they're not allowed to fail. The question is, will the system fail? And we're going to take a break. We'll wrap things up when we come back. But I think this leads us to our Thursday conversation, which is ultimately about college sports and whether it's even sustainable at this point. Lots to discuss. It's the Coach and the Commentator with the Crispin Brothers. Welcome back. It's Coach and the Commentator with the Crispin Brothers, Joe and John Crispin. I'm John Crispin, ESPN college basketball analyst, joined by my brother, Joe, head men's basketball coach at Rowan University and former Penn State basketball great. Look, we've dug in quite a bit in here, our pilot episode to the culture of sports and kind of all things surrounding sports. And it's not just the college level type of stuff. I was saying at the break that I wanted to get a book recommendation almost every show. Sometimes I'll give you one, but you are usually full of them. So what kind of book recommendation do you have, and is it relevant?
Yeah, anybody who knows me knows I always have a book recommendation, and I usually make it sound like you have to read it immediately. This is one I'm actually reading right now. I'm not all the way through. It's called Irresistible by Adam Alter. And I think it's in line of what we were talking about, the rise of addicted technology and the business of keeping us hooked is the subtitle. Yeah. And it's in the same vein as The Social Dilemma. But when you look at, long story short, like when you look at college athletes, when you look at how these kids and these even professional players have grown up, they've grown up in a different environment. I mean, we didn't have Nintendo growing up on purpose. Our dad kicked us outside, thankfully, and I still do that for my kids. But the technology now is so advanced in the ability to keep us hooked, and we've all experienced it. I'm on my iPhone too much. So it's an easy read. It's a quick read. It's good, some good stuff. And it does give some insight. And I've been reading it going, geez, he's talking about me too.
Yeah. Well, I think the key with some of those books too is just a conscious awareness. Like there are so many things that you just aren't aware of until it's put in front of your face. And addictive technology. sometimes the addictive technology leads to addiction to self. And that's the other part with the world of sports that we really are probably going to touch on this Thursday here, in so long as we make it to episode 2. But I think we're all right.
Well, too, is like there's a reason why we have an iPhone box. I mean, we have that in our locker room, and they're not to come upstairs, and it's that you have to do that. If not, it'll be a timeout, and everybody's checking their phone in practice. Yeah. It's for real. The stuff is for real. These people behind it are smart.
It's funny. It's getting harder and harder to build a good team, to build a good program with consistency and sustainability, and it's getting harder and harder to keep the attention of the team you've got. Challenges all over the place for the coaches, commentators. We just talk about it either way. We'll talk to you Thursday. We're going to expand upon the sustainability of the culture of sports and sustainability of college sports in general, particularly on the football and the basketball side of things. It's the coach and the commentator, Joe and John Crispin. We'll talk to you Thursday.
Thanks for listening to The Coach and the Commentator with hosts Joe and John Crispin. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. for new episodes. Only heard on ESPN Radio 103.7 and 1450. The Coach and the Commentator is sponsored by Lion Country Kia.